Here's a bunch of pretty substantial changes to Warhammer 3 with patch 4.1. First of all, the big one here, a sort of siege rework, although maybe that's a little bit too grand of a thing to call it because there's no huge changes, but a few nice ones that do, I think, make some improvements to sieges. So taking a look at Altdorf here, this is the old numbers first of all. The gate had 6,000 health, the walls had 8,000 health, and the towers 7,500 health. So that's old Altdorf numbers. Now the gate has 12,000 health, so that's double what it had before. Gates are now much tougher. The walls have 12,000 health, up from 8,000, so about a 50% increase. And towers going from 7,500 to also 12,000, so a big jump for them as well. I think unique settlements like Altdorf do get a little bit more than some others, but still very nice changes that the walls and gates are getting much more health so that they mean a little bit more and you can't just bypass them and get into a settlement really easily. It'll also add a little more value to siege towers as well. The barricades have also had some health upgrades. The platform going from 5,000 health, this is the old numbers here, and the blocker at 10,000 health. Those have both gone up, although only a little bit. The platform now has 6,000, so only an extra 1,000. And the blocker barricade an extra 2,000, so not huge on those, but a little bit. We'll have to see if it makes any meaningful difference. Arrow Tower's health went up a little bit as well, from 5,000 to 6,000, so only a little bit there too. But more interestingly, they've now gained the ability to spot hidden units, so no more sneaking past them to take a cheeky point before the enemy realizes. These towers also getting much shorter in range, going from 350 range down to 200, so they won't be able to hit like a quarter of the settlement like before, and you'll have to really position yourself well to make good use of them if you want their support. There's also been some changes to the unit's damage and how those will interact with buildings. Basically, you'll get a bunch of extra damage towards buildings if you are of a certain type, which is those with the wall breaker ability, like warp grinders with their warp quake ability. That'll do a hell of a lot of damage to buildings, which, by the way, includes everything that we've just mentioned: gates, walls, towers, barricades. It all counts as buildings, so they'll all get this extra damage versus those things. And also, any unit which causes fire damage will do extra damage to these things as well. And probably the most notable thing of all of this... there it is. Destroyed buildings cannot be rebuilt. So when you blast down an arrow tower, it will not be coming back. And that slot won't be usable anymore. So that's a really nice change, and we won't see so many pop-up arrow towers. We will still see them, though, because they can still be built in slots that haven't been used. But it's nice that now you can at least kind of carve a nice safe path through a settlement without a tower that you already destroyed just magically popping back up. Same with barricades as well. Another pretty huge change, which is going to disappoint all of you filthy, dirty, horrible siege cheesers like me, is that the main victory location now has a lock on it, so you will not be able to take it until you have taken the key building point as well. So no longer will you be able to sneak in with a stalk unit and take that victory objective before the enemy has any idea what's going on, like I usually do. Well, technically you still can, but it'll just be much harder. You could maybe go from one to the other and do it that way, but of course, the enemy might just come and take back the key building, so it's not really going to work. You'd need to maybe commit more units to it, but still, this is basically obviously trying to make us fight our sieges, which I'm not against now that the walls and stuff mean a bit more. Maybe sieges will be a little bit more fun, and I'll actually want to play them. So overall, some steps in the right direction for sieges. I'm certainly going to give my next bunch of siege battles in campaigns a good try to see how this all feels. One other main thing that hasn't been addressed yet, which I think they will be going to, is the ladder situation and how they just spawn out of everybody's ass. I think the good old solution of just making them a pushable thing that can be easily destroyed like the old Total Wars would work fine here, but we'll have to see what they do. Another pretty annoying thing that was in sieges and minor settlements was when you had these choke points where you could put barricades, but you could only put it on one side. So if you wanted to put a blocker to kind of slow the enemy down, well, if you wanted to do it in both sections, you'd have to commit a unit to do that. And that was kind of wasteful. And yeah, just didn't really make much sense. Here it is again. This is the Ubersreich map. You can see one side is blockable, one side is not. So you can't really do anything that useful there. Until now, this is the new Ubersreich map, and you can see there are 2 build points for barricades, and over here as well, 2 build points for barricades. So finally, this is actually going to be useful, because this is good. Sometimes the enemy will come in from this direction, say. I don't want to try and slow them down so that I can deal with another part of their army elsewhere, but I could only put 1 barricade, so it didn't slow them down at all. But now I actually can, and you can make some tactical usage of your barricades with all of these new points on all siege and minor settlement maps. Very nice. So overall, some positive changes for sieges and minor settlements, hopefully making them a little bit more enjoyable to play. I hope they still continue to experiment with things though, and maybe try to improve in other areas as well. onto another big change that I think pretty much everybody will be glad of. Changes to how units disengage from combat. So before, when you pulled a unit out of combat, if 1 or 2 or 3 models got stuck, it would pull the entire unit back into that fight. We all know that frustration, right? Well, that pretty much shouldn't happen anymore. Now, when you pull a unit out of combat, as long as the majority of the unit gets out of combat, that is 50% or more roughly, then your unit will stay out of combat and will not be dragged back into it. Especially handy if you have a situation like this where your cavalry maybe ends up fighting an anti-large unit, you want to get them out of there as quickly as possible, and you do it, and then you go off and micro other things, but then you find your unit's been dragged back in and killed. Well, no longer for the most part. So that's a really nice change, should make battles feel a little more responsive and less clunky. Oh, and it also applies to flying units as well, so you know how before it kind of made no sense that a flying unit couldn't just instantly fly out of combat? Well, now they'll do it a lot better. Another fairly substantial change, one that people have been asking for a long time, there is now a skill respec button. You hit this little button over here, reset all skill points. This will of course give you all of your skill points back to respec as you wish, but it will cost you 3 turns of that lord being out of action, which is a pretty small price to pay. You'll just need to select a stand-in lord for a little bit, but then when your new lord comes back, or your old lord comes back new rather, you'll have all of your skill points there to redistribute as you wish. Now, where is this handy? Because for the most part, it's probably not that handy in like the yellow lines. But with something like the red line that buffs up your army, maybe early on you said to yourself, hey, I want to make an army of Sargard. And then you changed your mind and you were like, I'm kind of bored of the Sargard now. I want to make an army of something else and make them strong. Well, those skill points then kind of become useless, so you can respec them and put them somewhere else. Maybe to make an army of bears, because why wouldn't you make an army of bears in the first place, dummy? But yeah, gives you a nice early option to respec, at least early on in your campaign. Once you've got enough skill points, you kind of have everything you want, right? You don't really need to respec, you just get everything. But a nice option to have there all the same. Another slightly smaller but potentially pretty impactful change is to magic missiles and any projectile that kind of homes in. Like the Amber Spear here, but it could also affect things like the Hell Cannon, for example, because that homes in. It basically just makes them a whole lot more accurate and thus less likely to miss and certainly harder to dodge as well. And certainly that'll be quite impactful on a spell like this, Vindictive Glare, which has multiple projectiles in one shot. So all in all, these kind of spells and things are going to be much more effective and powerful, which could affect the Lord sniping game pretty heavily, which is probably more of an issue for multiplayer, but still, nice that these will be a little bit better now. And lastly, more of a fix in all honesty than a change, but before, you could only get the achievements for Immortal Empires by completing the Domination or Ultimate Victory campaign, which basically meant you need to play the game for about 900 hours to get a campaign victory achievement, but now you can get it at the Long Victory achievement, so that's goddamn nice. Although some victory conditions still do need some work, like Manfred having to try and take the entirety of the Empire lands when he's down in the fucking desert, like, fuck off. Arguably 100% the best change this patch though is the fact that Gres' Goldtooth now has 400 speed. That's right, 400 speed. This is definitely not a mistake. Look at him go. He's an absolute speed demon. Sadly, it's not as powerful as you think it might be, because when he enters charge range and gets told to charge, he will slow down to his charge speed, which is an actual speed. He's also really slow at turning, but hey, if you just charge him around and never actually give a charge order, the man can't be stopped. It is quite comical, although not as fast as I thought it would look. 400 speed sounds incredibly fast, but it actually doesn't feel that fast. Look at him go though. Quick, have some fun with this before they patch it out with a hotfix. But there we go. I hope you've enjoyed this. Thanks for watching. Thanks to all the patrons who support this channel. I'll see you in the future.